Hello! Today, we're going to explore something fascinating, the difference between myths and history. Both tell us stories about the past, but they do so in very different ways. By the end of our journey, you'll understand how historians work like detectives to discover what really happened long ago, and why the stories we call myths have been important to people throughout time. Let's start by understanding what history actually is. History is our attempt to understand what really happened in the past. Historians are like detectives, searching for clues and evidence to piece together accurate stories about real people and events. They examine artifacts, objects made by humans long ago. They study written records like letters, diaries, and official documents. They analyze ancient buildings and even dig into the earth to find buried treasures from the past. When historians make claims about what happened, they need evidence to back it up. That's why history is always changing. Every time we discover a new ancient city, uncover a forgotten document, or develop new scientific methods to study the past, we learn more, and sometimes we have to rewrite what we thought we knew. Now that we understand what history is about, let's explore something different but equally fascinating: myths. Myths are special stories passed down through generations. Unlike history, myths weren't created to document facts accurately. Instead, they were designed to explain the unknown, teach important lessons, or share values that a community believed in. Long before modern science, people created myths to make sense of the natural world. Why does thunder boom in the sky? Why do seasons change? How did humans first appear on Earth? Different cultures created different stories to answer these big questions. To help you understand better, let's explore some examples of both myths and history from different cultures around the world. In ancient Greece, people told stories about Zeus throwing lightning bolts from Mount Olympus when he was angry. That's a myth, a creative explanation for lightning. But the fact that Greeks built the Parthenon Temple in Athens around 2,500 years ago? That's history, supported by the building itself that still stands today, and by written records from that time. Native American tribes shared stories about how various animals got their unique features, like how the rabbit got its long ears or why the crow is black. These are myths that taught important lessons, but the sophisticated farming techniques they developed over thousands of years? That's history, proven by archaeological evidence of their agricultural systems. You might be wondering at this point, if myths aren't historically accurate, why do we still study them? Well, that's an excellent question. Now here's something important. Just because myths aren't historically accurate doesn't mean they aren't valuable. Myths tell us so much about what people believed, what they valued, and how they understood their world. They're like windows into the hearts and minds of past cultures. History tells us what happened. Myths often tell us what people wished would happen, or what they feared might happen, or how they made sense of their experiences. Both are important pieces of our human story. But this brings up an important question. How can you, as clever young scholars, tell myths from history apart? Let's explore some helpful clues. So how can you, as clever young scholars, tell myths from history? Ask these questions. What evidence supports this story? Can archaeologists find physical proof? Are there written records from people who witnessed events firsthand? Does the story include magical elements or gods and goddesses performing supernatural feats? Those are clues you might be dealing with a myth. Was the story meant to explain something people didn't understand scientifically? That's often the purpose of myths. Does the account come from multiple independent sources that generally agree on what happened? That's a good sign it might be historical. Here's something really interesting that might surprise you. Sometimes myths and history aren't completely separate. They can actually overlap in fascinating ways. Here's where it gets really interesting. Sometimes myths and history overlap. Some myths contain kernels of historical truth. For centuries, people thought the ancient city of Troy, from Homer's epic poems, was just a myth. Then archaeologists discovered the real city buried under layers of earth. The stories about gods and heroes fighting there were myths, but the city itself was real. So what does all this mean for you as students learning about the past? Let me share some thoughts about how you can apply this knowledge in your own learning. When you study the past, approach it with both wonder and critical thinking. Appreciate myths for their creativity and the values they teach, but learn to look for evidence when you want to know what really happened. Remember that history isn't just about memorizing dates and names. It's about understanding how people lived, what they believed, and how their actions shaped our world today. And myths aren't just made-up stories. They're powerful reflections of human hopes, fears, and questions about our place in the universe. As we come to the end of our discussion today, I want to leave you with a few final thoughts. So the next time you hear a story about the past, ask yourself, is this history based on evidence we can verify? Or is it a myth created to explain, inspire, or teach? Both have value, but in different ways. And who knows? Maybe someday you'll become a historian or archaeologist yourself, uncovering new evidence that helps us better understand our shared human journey. Thank you for joining me on this exploration of myths and history. Keep questioning, keep wondering, and keep learning about our amazing past.